Hello. Hello, I'm Hanna Harnik, and this is Cultural Diplomacy, the Ukrainian Voices in the World special edition in English. And today we want to talk about very subtle, very quiet subject, not obvious. It's a propaganda in Western mass media. And we're going to talk about its messages and what it does to us, to our brain, and to our perception of the world. Stay with us. And of course, as a Ukrainian host of the Ukrainian show, I want to focus on mostly Russian propaganda in Western mass media. To understand it better, I have invited a very special guest. She has visited many countries. She teaches students. She teaches English to students from different countries. She got a lot of different messages, and she has a curious mind. She asks questions, she thinks, but even with her curious and sharp mind, she sometimes captured herself reading those messages that probably not exactly facts. I captured myself with that perception many times until I ask myself any questions. I just go on thinking sometimes things that would, horrify me any other moment when I give myself a trouble to think about that. So let me present our guest, Mina Danik, documentary film producer, creative producer, and the teacher of English and accents. Hello, Mina.
Hi, nice to be here with you.
Nice to see you here. So once we met, I remember you asked me a question. It wasn't actually a question. It was kind of like a topic to discuss. So what about protecting national borders? And I remember you said about Russian students that have been talking about that Russia protecting themselves. And we talked like half a night. I hope you don't regret it, because I really enjoyed it.
I had a lot of questions.
You had a lot of questions, and I had even more questions. What would you like to start with? Because I got interesting inquiries from you, but I would actually love to hear your opinion first. Like today, you raised a question which is super interesting and not very obvious to anyone, including Ukrainians and Russians. What's the connection between Putin and communism?
Communism, exactly. Because communism is a very strong word, especially in America. We kind of are afraid of it, and any government that kind of goes into that direction of becoming just a little bit socialist, or we immediately think of communism, and it's something very negative. But we never ask ourselves, like, what is the connection between communism and Russia today? Like, what are the remains of communism in Russia, and the government right now, does it have any connection to it? So that would be like my question. I haven't found it anywhere. Like, no media speaks about it.
No media, but there is a question about that in people's minds, but no one talks about that.
Yes.
No media speaks about that. That's curious. Let's think about how and why. I think that let's think together. So what's communist? What's communism? First of all, that's an idea of in its radical way, no state. Actually,
right. It's a radical leftist, right?
Yeah. No, it's actually radical everything, because primary communists, they wanted no private property, and no state as well. So it was kind of anarchist idea, which proved to not work like the first years. I don't know if you know, but they even have. So Lenin had published an edict that women should be in public availability too. Yes, it was one of them.
So sharing everything.
Yes.
Common share. Okay, I didn't know that. Because I studied political science, so we studied socialism, and some ideas of socialism, like equality and some models of industry that kind of employ people from the same area and are completely sustainable. They're studied today at Harvard and Stanford. So those are socialist idea, but the question is communism. So communism is more radical. So, and the Russian government right now is showing to be more radical. So like, are there any connections between the two?
Well, if we go to the communist state as Soviet Union was, it wasn't quite communist if we take the theory and those scientists, or let's call them scientists, whatever, those who studied and who kind of developed this idea. Our perception of communism as a very radical socialism is not quite right, I think. I mean, they are connected, but as I said, radical communism, it means no state at all. But it turned into something completely different. So what was Soviet Union as a communist, socialist, and some kind of like this pro-communist, state,
But it's actually very funny now that I think about that all the ex-socialist and communist countries are now going into dictatorships.
Not all.
Some
Ukraine
of them
doesn't.
Yeah, but Ukraine has a part of it. But let's say Hungary or like Balkans. So
it's very
and
good.
the question is why? Because maybe people are used to this socialist system and they are used to having this one leader who's going to lead them. They're not thinking with their own minds, right?
Yeah, that is so pleasant to have such a smart guest, because you're actually, it's funny because the moment you have any questions about, let's say, our world, you can actually answer them yourself.
Right.
Because you just answered, actually. So, yes, that's basically, so coming back to Soviet Union, it was, let's call it communist state, but the main features were very strong state. So remember, the theory demands no state, but it was actually very strong state. Share everything. To share everything, you need to collect everything first.
Right. Make it public property.
Yeah, literally collect. So they would say like everyone has to work as much as they can and give everything to the state, and then state kind of shares it according to your needs.
Right.
So that was
They
the
decide
idea.
how much you need.
And imagine now the immense, like terrifically huge power of that state that has the right to collect everything and then share. So like someone else is taking decisions for everyone, which creates like this elite, communist elite that decides everything, and everyone who is against it is called the enemy of the state and persecuted and mostly killed.
So in theory, that would be a good idea, maybe somewhere in the future. But right now, as humans, we're not ready for it. We have a lot of greedy leaders who are using that communal ideology for their own benefit. And so I think that's what's going on. In theory, maybe socialism somehow in the future can work, but not right now because we...
Yeah, I totally agree. But I think that communism doesn't really take into account, let's say, modern human nature. So it can work if we all voluntarily donate everything.
Yes.
The moment the violence comes, it just stops working.
We're not there yet.
We're not there yet.
Exactly.
Definitely. So coming back to your question, Putin and communism. He executes the first part very effectively, collecting everything, having the strong state, but not sharing. So that's why the answer to your question is kind of somewhere in between, somewhere in the middle.
Maybe some pro-Putin Russians are still, maybe they have some good memories of communism and that's why they support him, right? Because he kind of looks like it, but...
Those who have good memories of communism were mostly communists, members of Communist Party who worked in cities, because if you were in the village, you were kind of like a slave who had just to work, and you didn't even have a passport till the end of the 70s.
So that would be like a higher class, right? The intelligence so.
Just not very intelligent. When you imagine high class in USA, for example, you think of elite, Harvard, like Obama talking, good, eloquent speech, etc. But yeah, it's not quite the case.
So I meant like educated people, let's say, who have higher education, let's leave it at that.
Who are loyal to the party.
And yeah.
First of all. That education goes the second. It's not the main thing. That's the problem with the communist society, because it worships the poor people. And poor not always means just unlucky. Sometimes it's just lazy or not educated, or just, I don't want to work.
So in that regard, it is going more into the populist, right? It is kind of catering to the poor. So then the far left and the far right kind of reach a circle, and they're combined.
Yes, and that's a brilliant spot, because that's coming back to Russian propaganda. They support different parties in different European countries. Sometimes they are radical left, sometimes they are radical right. Because it's not about ideology, it's about the influence and the strong power. And any radical wing is tending to dictatorship, more or less, right?
Yeah.
Can we agree on that? Because that's what I think. I studied political science only 1 year, so I'm behind you with that, but I'm glad we agree on that. So I remember you told me about a different messages in Western media that you've got about Zelensky, about Ukraine. Can you tell me more about that? Because since you followed it up and I didn't that much.
Sure. I wanted to just touch base on one more thing when you mentioned protecting the national borders. So people in the U.S. mostly who not defend, but who are trying to understand Putin's ideology, they're comparing it to the U.S. So the U.S. has the right to protect their borders. Why doesn't Russia have the right to protect their borders? So that's the parallel that they're making.
Yeah.
And so what would you say about that?
What do you think about the right of USA to protect their borders? Well, I mean, how do you extend this right? Till what extension?
Well, I think that we have this advantage maybe that we are surrounded by the sea on both sides. Well, Mexico is in the south. We are trying to control the south and the north, the Canada and Mexico. We are trying to have good relations just because, to protect our borders. But like, if America in any way feels endangered, that their borders are threatened, they're going to react. So that's what people are like, okay, we are reacting to the threats to our country. When Putin said that Russia is in danger, so he has a right to protect it. So that's the parallel that they were making.
But how do you react to the threat? Imagine you have a threat, I don't know, from Canada.
Well, first thing is diplomacy. You try to negotiate, right? Yeah. And if it doesn't work, then you threaten, right? You're like, if you come closer, we are going to, fire our missiles, whatever. And
so you won't wait till they attack first? Well, I can't imagine really Mexico attack USA or Canada.
Yeah, it's not a better scenario. I mean, we had this Cuba crisis, right, where the Russian ships came to Cuba, and this is like a tension there.
Yeah.
So it's closer to American border, and this is a still ongoing crisis, like because Russians are coming in, they're pulling back. There's some agreements signed, but nobody, they're not getting that close. It's still in the diplomacy.
So, but they resolved it in diplomacy, but there was Cold War when everyone was afraid of communism, and really everyone was fighting. Well, not everyone, but I mean big countries, mostly, let's say, two polar camps, Soviet Union and some satellites, and USA and Western Europe. They were fighting for literally other countries to get them under or from someone else's influence. And it's kind of, it's very gray zone, right? Because one thing, if it's like in my perfect world, like we're now Russia attacked Ukraine without any proof that there were any American influence, without any, the threat of the borders, even if we take for a second that Russia has the right to attack if they feel threatened, which I don't agree with, but let's even agree on that for a moment, for the sake of argument. So there has to be some facts.
Right.
And the facts were in 2008, when we felt threatened by Russia first time after the first revolution, when we finally got the honest elections and we voted for the president and he wasn't a dictator anymore. We applied for NATO membership and we got refused because Russia would be offended. So we have been told that it's never going to happen because we don't want to have problems.
You're too east.
We don't want to have problems with Russia, and they said Ukraine is like critical, strategical, whatever. So that is almost already disgusting for me when someone else is deciding our destiny, Russia or NATO or whatever.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But still, there was a fact. So we've been refused. Also, in Ukrainian constitution, there is a statement that we're a neutral country. To change it, it's also in constitution, you need a referendum, so people have to vote for it. It never happened. So claiming that NATO was moving to its borders doesn't make sense at all.
I just wanted to say now, as with young citizens of America, when you said like protecting the borders, if America was in a situation to have this imaginary threat by somebody or an attack, and then attack first, I can agree that 90% of the younger population, my generation, would not agree with that. And so in that sense, like my Russian students, all of them moved from Russia and they live somewhere else. So I do understand them, that they immediately when the attack started, they were like, we're not part of this because we don't want to participate. We understand what's going on. So, and that the Americans would feel the same. So if America would do something against the will of the citizens to protect something that is not yet, attacked, so that would be a problem. Like we would probably move to South America or somewhere, just like immigrate.
Yeah, basically, because you have democratic traditions and you don't support this. I mean, Vietnam War was quite very gray zone, and it was like a huge social reaction to that, like never again, we're not going to do that. And in this case, there were actually two Vietnamese parties fighting between each other. One was supported by communists, another one was supported by Americans. So it was kind of not direct interference, but like supporting the inner fight. So that's why I call it gray zone. It wasn't the invasion. No one invaded Vietnam, but they were kind of like supporting, and actually it was an invasion, but with the invitation of the local people. Which make it not black but gray zone.
And they're still communist right now.
Yeah. So there was a lot of people have been killed. And for example, in Ukraine, when we were so we fought against Soviet Russia for 6 years till it finally, in like there were a few steps, but finally in 1923, 24, depends on what part of Ukraine, we kind of became Soviet Union after a lot of blood was spilled, and we would be happy someone to interfere and help us in this struggle because we were too small, but no one did. So in some cases, if like in my perfect world, if I am attacked in my house and I need police, it's good for me that police comes. So that's why the NATO and the UNO were created to be like an international police, right? To help execute the international law. And the international law that appeared after Second World War was like, borders are sacred. No one touches them anymore because it will lead to the Third World War. And it worked till 2014.
And going back to the Zelensky situation, so first we talked about how he was received by Trump in America. That was a very, as a journalist and media student and specialist, later I was secondhand embarrassed, and it was so, I mean, it was theater, basically, the way so the Republican government was not in right to do that at all. But so while I was living in Europe, there's this ambiguity between like some media blaming Zelensky for like the lack of support to Ukraine. Some are highlighting Zelensky's successes. So it's like a very biased situation. Like me, as somebody who's watching from outside, like I haven't formed opinion on him. I know that he's an actor who turned politician, but are his political moves good or bad? Like I don't know. Like I didn't find enough information in the media about that. So whose fault is that? Like why? I mean,
you mean whose fault is that Russia attacked? Or
also that question, yeah, is because I haven't found that in the media. Like, was the participation of like Zelensky winning? Did that lead to the the ultimate attack? Was Putin angry that he was elected? If somebody else would get elected, maybe the situation would be better, or the war would never be played out. So what's the?
Well, again. We can talk a lot about that, and I have my personal, very contradictory opinion about Zelensky. But we can take facts, and the facts were that actually at the moment of elections, Zelensky won exactly because he had, so the previous president, who was his main rival, he was very precise and strict about, so make the army has to be even stronger, Ukrainian language has to be supported, Russia has to be defeated. So he was like much more, let's say, pro-Ukrainian. And Zelensky was actually proposing people peace. He was playing the card that maybe the former president couldn't deal with Putin, couldn't negotiate, so he will do that.
So he was closer to Putin than the other candidate. Okay, that was, I didn't know that at all. I thought the opposite, that Zelensky was pro. Oh wow. Okay.
That's
and so why did not Putin then manage to negotiate with Zelensky?
Because he never wanted peace.
Okay.
He never wanted. That's my point exactly. And that's the answer to your question. Zelensky was, well, I won't be that bold to call him pro-Russian at the beginning, but he was quite more pro-Russian than pro-Ukrainian in terms of ending the war.
That was not how he was presented in the Western media. So. That's not what I read, at least. So this is like a new information for me, but it makes sense.
Well, it's as usually easily checked. And second, he was like that. You can actually see that with Trump. So at first he's like, I'm gonna negotiate, it's gonna be fine. And then Putin makes few insults, and then Trump is like, ugh! Because, narcissists getting offended.
Exactly. Dictators cannot communicate. I mean, they pull to their side. There's no agreement there.
Probably they can, but not with Putin. I mean, Putin has to be like the alpha male. So that's how he talks to everyone. So when you try to negotiate with him, he first insults you, puts you at your place, and you kind of like, what? I'm trying to make peace here. So actually Trump is kind of following Zelensky's step. And the most funny part, Zelensky is following the steps of the former president, or the previous president of Ukraine, who also tried to negotiate first to stop Putin with diplomacy. And only when it failed, they, kind of like it failed. I mean, the soldiers were already there in Ukraine, so kind of diplomacy took some time, but eventually we started just to prepare for war, because that was the only. So yeah, Zelensky was absolutely, he literally said once, that's a quote, I talked to Putin and I saw peace in his eyes. I'm sure I can make peace with him.
Oh, that was like a spiritual message. Like I read him.
That was in 2019. And he tried. And then in 2021, when he realized that it's kind of failing, diplomacy is failing, so he did even more. And that's also easily Googled. He promised Putin to pull back the forces, the military forces, and he did. 100 kilometers.
That was actually I read that somewhere.
Yeah,
that was
but
in the media.
That's the like. I pull back. Like I'm offering you, and it was actually Ukrainian territory, and that was the territory that was previously freed by our soldiers, and they spilled their blood. So the soldiers were so deeply insulted and offended by this move. It was like, we paid with our lives to free those cities, and now we're giving them back. And he was just like, no, I'm not giving back. I'm just showing Putin that I don't want to fight. But it was already in Ukraine. Even that move, didn't bring peace.
I also want to say that because I was following, actually, when the war started, I was following the war on TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
And Ukrainian war, I think, or Russian-Ukrainian war was the first one that was kind of publicized in that way. So people were watching it as a video game. Russian missiles reach this town, and so you had updates on TikTok and Instagram about, like, you know, cities being shot, and like it is now in this new media world, and now we have it with Palestine. Like, this new broadcast of war is desensitizing people to, you know, it's like a video game that you watch from afar. We did not relate to the Ukrainian people because it's almost like not real. When you see it, you're like, sometimes maybe some people think, it didn't actually start. Who knows where the missiles fired? Like, it's happening somewhere out there in America, especially because we're far. And then just the way that it was publicized, it took a while. Maybe it took like 50 days, 100 days to actually realize, okay, so they're fighting over there. It's actually happening. And, yeah.
Have you heard about those videos with mass killings and actual genocide in occupied territories, that they were faked and they were shot by Ukrainian authorities?
So there were videos on TikTok that I saw about some crimes committed in eastern Ukraine. Mm-hmm. But some of them were related to some. So how it was explained, that there were a lot of paramilitary formations over there, and it was not clear who's attacking who. And like, there's some militaries that are just like entering villages and killing people, but like, it is not clear from what side. And then they also some like Armenian paramilitary formation brought by who. Like, it was so confusing, and there were not actually two sides. Like, how it was presented, it was like, you know.
Oh my God, I didn't even know about Armenian. No, Armenia was busy with Azerbaijan.
Yeah, the Azerbaijani. I'm not. Don't quote me on this. I'm not sure, but like outside of Russia and Ukraine.
No, but I mean, those two countries, Armenia and Azerbaijan, were in the conflict themselves, and they definitely were not involved. They didn't
Which country is pro-Russian out of those two?
Armenia used to be kind of getting aid from Russia, but now they're like made peace and they're neutral because they didn't get a Russian help because Russia was busy in Ukraine.
Okay.
But they were not there. I mean, and remember I showed you, I probably told you that our soldiers wore yellow bands, so to be visible, because at first they could be dressed almost the same, because the military uniform was quite similar, and the language, I mean, our soldiers can speak Russian too. They mostly try to use only Ukrainian, not to be confused, but anyway, what I'm saying is for our people who were occupied by Russian and freed by Ukrainians, it was obvious who is there because they were using Ukrainian language and everything. But for probably Western media, they're like, someone is moving, shooting there, nothing is clear. And that's probably gives a lot of room for interpretation.
I also saw a video on TikTok which was deeply disturbing. I don't speak Russian or Ukrainian, but there was like actually in this video a soldier dies. I'm not sure on which side, but it's actually a very disturbing video that was like publicly displayed and people saw it, where they're hitting each other from afar and they're speaking something probably like they understand each other, and each of them is telling the other to stop, like don't do it, don't, like why are you attacking me, and the other. And so for me, I read it like that, because if you have like a strong if you have a country that has that's a dictatorship, right? And if you are, let's say, obliged or somehow forced to go into the military, you cannot pull back. Even if you see somebody who you don't want to hurt, you're still going to do it. And that's kind of the humanity failed there in my regard, because they're doing something that they've been told. They're not thinking with their own heads. They're just executing the orders, right? Even if the other person is like, stop, like, I don't want to fight you, you still are going further. And I mean,
Yeah, well, I really, my belief is that we are responsible for our actions, and that's exactly where dictatorship becomes possible, when we delegate our responsibility to someone else. So, like, I was sent there, I was forced. It's not my fault.
It's my duty.
It doesn't work. You have your own. I mean, a lot of Russians, they left. At least left. They were not like strong enough to fight, but they at least didn't want to participate in that. So those who do not want to participate in that, you know, then I see they make a move. But
I think they were blackmailed. So we also spoke about such a situation in the Balkans, and that what's going on in Serbia. They also have a mini dictator right now. And so they're
very good.
Well, because they're a smaller country, but that's why I'm saying. So he's getting into power, right? He's stepping into his function, and so a lot of the military is blackmailed in a very good way with the apartments, with high salaries. They have
That's
the
not
highest
blackmail. That's,
they have.
Bribery.
Exactly, like the highest salaries, or they tell them, like, if you don't do this, we will, you will have consequence. And so what we're seeing is that actually military and the police, they also have families, they have small babies, but they're attacking primary school kids because they've been told to do that. And so...
Yeah, that's how dictatorship works.
Or
starts, yes, and then they go step by step. They take your freedom, take your liberty, take your power of will, and whom can you blame?
Right.
Yourself, because you gave that opportunity. I know it seems easier, but in the end you lose anyway. So when you think that you compromise because it's easier, and it is easy at the beginning, but in the end everyone loses except the communist elite who collects everything and shares only to themselves.
So I also have this question in my mind, like, what in America we say State of the Union, like, what would be the state of the unions in the future, like countries who are ex-unions, like USSR or Yugoslavia, or like even America as a union of states? Like, is there the need to, like, because obviously every country has its borders, but because we live in different times, like with technology and everything, we're more connected, more globalized. So is it important to defend the border? I mean, is it important to form these unions? We're already united just in a different way. We're in a different time period. So there's no need kind of for regional unification. It's more like...
Well, hopefully it's the future for like some global union. Probably that what people who do not want to fight, that's how they see it. And we're going to talk about the future in the next edition, because I really want to invite Mina again now that our time is running out. And now just a small hint, Putin once applied to NATO. Russia wanted to be taken to NATO. It was far ago, but that's another story. But it's crazy. Thank you for being with us, and it was amazingly interesting, because sometimes we don't even know what our side eye or side ear captures, and it stays in our mind, and then someone's like, why do I think like that? Oh yes. And once I heard in Serbia that someone said that I am deeply grateful to our guest for all these analyses of everything.
I hope I was clear, yeah.
You were absolutely clear. That was amazingly interesting. Unfortunately, our time runs out, so see you next Wednesday. З вами була передача «Культурна дипломатія». Ганна Гарник, Мінна Даняк. Дякую. Thank you.
Bye, thank you.